Pay attention to Hannah Elizabeth Graham, 18 years old, standing unsteadily outside Tempo restaurant in downtown Charlottesville at 1:03 a.m. She has less than 2 hours left to live because Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr., 32 years old, has just put his arm around her shoulder like an old friend, guiding her away from the cameras, away from the crowded streets, away from anyone who might help. On this early Saturday morning in September 2014, Hannah just wants to find her way home. On this morning, Jesse Matthew has already decided she never will. This is the story of 36 days that changed everything, captured frame by frame on surveillance cameras that would expose a predator hiding in plain sight. Hannah Graham wasn't supposed to be in America at all. Born in Reading, England, to John and Sue Graham, she arrived in the United States when she was just 5 years old, holding her older brother James's hand as their family started over in Stratford Landing, Virginia. It was a charming neighborhood with history in every corner, once owned by George Washington himself, now filled with families chasing the American dream. And Hannah embraced that dream with everything she had. She was the girl who couldn't walk into a room without smiling, the athlete who pushed herself on the softball field until her uniform was covered in dirt, the musician whose alto saxophone filled the house with jazz on Sunday mornings. Friends remembered her as the person who texted first, who remembered birthdays, who made everyone feel like they mattered. By September 2014, Hannah had earned her place at the University of Virginia. She was studying to be a physician assistant, already volunteering at local clinics, already planning how she'd give back to the community. Her parents watched her thrive, watched her transform from that 5-year-old English girl into this confident young woman who seemed destined for extraordinary things. On Friday, September 12th, 2014, Hannah made plans to meet friends downtown. It was supposed to be simple. Dinner at Fig around 10:45 p.m., then a party at Camden Plaza Apartments on 14th Street. Just another college weekend. Just another night that should have ended with her safe in her apartment. But evil was already watching. The evening started exactly as planned. Hannah met her friends, shared drinks and stories, laughed about professors and upcoming exams. Around midnight, she told friends at the Camden Plaza party that she wasn't feeling well. Someone offered to walk her home. Her apartment was less than half a mile away. Hannah said no. She'd be fine. It was a decision that would haunt everyone who loved her. Her friends would carry the weight of that moment forever. They'd offered. They'd wanted to make sure she got home safely. But Hannah had insisted she'd be okay, and they'd respected her independence. This is the terrible reality. A young woman cannot walk half a mile to her own apartment without someone watching her back, where independence can cost everything, where the simple act of going home alone becomes a death sentence. Instead of heading toward her apartment, Hannah walked in the opposite direction, toward the downtown mall where Tempo restaurant stayed open late. At 12:01 a.m., technically now September 13th, she sent a text to a friend, "I'm lost." 3 minutes later, "I don't feel well." Hannah Graham, honor student and athlete, was disoriented and alone on streets she'd walked 100 times before. The alcohol had hit harder than expected. Her steps were unsteady. Her phone remained in her hand, but she wasn't calling for help. What Hannah didn't know was that she wasn't alone anymore. What surveillance cameras would later reveal was chilling. Jesse Matthew had been watching Hannah for at least 20 minutes before he made contact. Earlier that evening, while Hannah was having drinks with friends, Matthew had been bar hopping through downtown Charlottesville. The Lazy Parrot was his first stop, then he moved from venue to venue. Women would later report to police that Matthew had made unwanted advances, stepped over lines, made them uncomfortable enough to remember him. But then, something changed. Around 12:30 a.m., cameras captured Matthew on the downtown mall. He was moving with purpose now, scanning the crowds, and then he spotted her. A young woman, clearly intoxicated, walking alone and disoriented. The footage shows Matthew following Hannah for several minutes, maintaining distance, watching her stumble and check her phone repeatedly. He let other people pass between them. He waited for the perfect moment when the street was less crowded. This wasn't random. This was calculated. Matthew approached Hannah near Tempo restaurant, putting his arm around her shoulders like they were old friends. She didn't pull away. Maybe she thought he was helping. Maybe she was too disoriented to realize the danger. Matthew went inside Tempo and bought 2 drinks. At 1:03 a.m., Hannah sent her final text. "I got stuck down though. The message made no sense. Autocorrect had mangled her words. A witness on the street later reported hearing Hannah say something that would haunt investigators. "I'm not getting in the car with you." And then she was gone. By Sunday, September 14th, Hannah's friends knew something was catastrophically wrong. When she missed her Sunday morning brunch, when her phone went straight to voicemail, when her apartment remained empty, they called her parents. The guilt they carried was immeasurable. They'd let her leave alone. They'd assumed she'd be fine. Now they had to tell her parents that Hannah was missing. John and Sue Graham drove from Northern Virginia to Charlottesville immediately. The University of Virginia Police Department launched a missing persons investigation before sunset. What happened next was a massive coordinated effort involving local police, state investigators, and federal law enforcement. Hannah's disappearance had struck a nerve. Several other young women had vanished from Charlottesville and Albemarle County in recent years. There was a pattern here, something dark operating in the shadows. Investigators collected surveillance footage from every business on Hannah's route that Friday night. Within 72 hours, they'd built a complete timeline and identified the last person seen with Hannah, Jesse, Leroy, Matthew Jr. The cameras had captured everything. His stalking, his approach, his arm around her shoulders, his purchase of drinks. What they hadn't captured was where they went next. On September 19th, 5 days after Hannah disappeared, detectives obtained a search warrant for Matthew's apartment. They'd already labeled him the back-to-school perpetrator in their internal documents. What they found inside changed everything. A cell phone with a SIM card removed, men's shorts containing DNA evidence from both Matthew and Hannah Graham, her genetic material on the passenger side door of his orange Chrysler Sebring. But then investigators ran Matthew's DNA through the national database, and they got a hit that stunned everyone involved. The genetic profile matched an unsolved case from 2005, a brutal attack in Fairfax County, Virginia. A young woman walking home from a store had been dragged into bushes, violently assaulted, threatened with death. She survived. Evidence was collected. But the DNA didn't match anyone in the system at that time. The victim had been so terrified she'd moved back to her home in India. The case went cold for 9 years. Now they knew who'd attacked her, and they knew he'd been operating freely ever since. A second search warrant on September 20th yielded more evidence. Matthew's Galaxy phone, bedding, pillows, clothes, a toothbrush, hair samples, a wallet, a cigar butt, fibers. A third search produced white shorts, a maroon shirt, and a towel with reddish-brown stains. Bloodhound units picked up Hannah's scent at 3 locations: the rear entrance to Matthew's apartment, the passenger door of his vehicle, and a nearby dumpster. On that same day, Matthew showed up at Charlottesville Police Department asking for a lawyer. He refused to speak about Hannah. Then he left the station, got into a car, and fled at high speed. Officers tried to follow but lost him in traffic. A nationwide manhunt was launched immediately. Investigators discovered Matthew had recently obtained a new driver's license and withdrawn most of his money from the bank. He'd been planning this. For 4 days, Jesse Matthew vanished. Police tracked his movements through credit card purchases and ATM withdrawals. He was heading south, then west, Texas bound. Meanwhile, investigators dug deeper into his background. What they found was a history of violence stretching back over a decade. In 2002, while attending Liberty University, Matthew had been accused of severely assaulting a female student. He left that school immediately. In 2003, at Christopher Newport University, another accusation. Again, he left. Neither case resulted in charges. The pattern was clear.
You know, the reward to find missing Hannah Graham is now up to $100,000, but the man charged with abducting her is now behind bars. We want to show you two key pieces of video from Galveston, Texas, but first take a look at this. This is the new mugshot after being arrested and booked. We know 32-year-old Jesse Matthew had been in Texas since at least Tuesday.
Matthew knew how to avoid consequences. He knew when to run. By September 24th, 11 days after Hannah disappeared, the reward for information had climbed to $100,000. Hannah's parents appeared on national news, pleading for anyone with information to come forward.
Please, please, please help end this nightmare for all of us. Please help us to bring Hannah home. Thank you.
September 24th, a beach in Galveston, Texas. A passerby spotted a large man matching Matthew's description camping in a tent on the beach. The man was driving a blue 1997 Nissan Sentra, the same vehicle Matthew's sister had reported missing. The passerby called 911. Galveston County Sheriff's Department officers moved in carefully. Matthew was physically imposing, 6 feet tall, 260 pounds. They didn't know if he was armed. They didn't know if he'd fight. But when officers approached, Matthew didn't resist. He appeared exhausted, defeated, resigned. He'd driven halfway across the country with nowhere left to run. Extradition paperwork was filed immediately. Charlottesville investigators flew to Texas to bring him back. Matthew's family released a statement through his aunt, Alice Fletcher, expressing shock and insisting Jesse couldn't have done this. They wanted to help find Hannah. They believed there'd been a terrible mistake. The evidence said otherwise. No. For 3 weeks, the search for Hannah continued. Hundreds of volunteers combed through wooded areas around Charlottesville. Dive teams searched lakes and rivers. Cadaver dogs swept through parks and abandoned properties. John and Sue Graham joined the searches, walking through dense forests, hoping and dreading what they might find. The university community rallied around them. Candlelight vigils were held. Hannah's face appeared on billboards across Virginia. 20 days, 25 days, 30 days. With each passing day, hope dimmed. And then came day 36. October 18th, 2014, a property owner walking through a densely wooded area behind a vacant residence off Old Lynchburg Road spotted what he initially thought were animal remains. As he got closer, he realized this was a tragic discovery of what was left of a person. Police sealed off the area. They found skeletal remains, a crop top, and jeans matching exactly what Hannah had been wearing. The top was inside out.
Today, teams back out searching for more clues. ABC's Bazi Kanani has the latest from Charlottesville.
One leg of the jeans was turned inside out. A watch was recovered nearby. Missing were her undergarments, shoes, and cell phone. A nearby resident provided the crucial detail. On the morning of September 13th, around dawn, they'd seen Matthew's orange Chrysler backed into an access road behind the property. The gate was closed. No one was in the vehicle. Matthew knew this area intimately. As a taxi driver for years, he'd learned every remote location, every hidden road, every place where someone could disappear. What was left of Hannah was transported to Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Kevin Wiley in Richmond. The autopsy revealed death by homicidal violence, most likely asphyxiation. The examination also showed 2 perimortem nasal fractures. DNA testing confirmed this was Hannah Elizabeth Graham. When investigators ran Matthew's DNA through expanded databases, they got another hit that sent shockwaves through law enforcement. The genetic profile matched evidence from the unsolved case of Morgan Dana Harrington. Morgan Harrington was a 20-year-old Virginia Tech student who disappeared in October 2009 after attending a Metallica concert at the University of Virginia. What was left of Morgan was discovered in January 2010 on a 742-acre farm in Albemarle County. The location where Morgan was found was only 6 miles from where Hannah's remains were discovered. DNA evidence from Morgan's t-shirt matched Jesse Matthew. The 2005 Fairfax County attack matched Jesse Matthew. 3 victims across 9 years, all connected by one predator. He'd been operating freely because he'd never been arrested for anything serious enough to get his DNA into the system until now. On February 10, 2015, Matthew was formally charged with first-degree homicide and kidnapping with malicious intent in Hannah Graham's case. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty. Matthew's defense attempted to negotiate 25 years in prison in exchange for admitting to both cases. The Graham and Harrington families rejected it immediately. 25 years meant Matthew might someday walk free. On March 2, 2016, a new plea agreement was reached. Matthew would confess to ending the lives of both Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington in exchange for removing the death penalty. The conditions were absolute: 4 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole, no early release, no geriatric release, no eligibility for any clemency. The trial lasted less than 3 days. Judge David Schell emphasized the brutal, vicious nature of Matthew's attacks during sentencing. When the verdict was read, Matthew's mother screamed and had to be removed from the courtroom. Matthew himself sat quietly, showed little emotion. He later asked his attorney to apologize to the families on his behalf. He claimed he was terribly sorry. Hannah's parents, John and Sue Graham, refused to let their daughter's death be meaningless. They testified before Virginia's Crime Commission with one devastating argument. If Matthew had been required to provide DNA when he was convicted of trespassing in 2010, he would have been linked to the Fairfax attack and the Harrington case immediately. Hannah would still be alive. In June 2018, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam signed bills expanding the list of misdemeanor convictions that trigger mandatory DNA collection. The legislation became known informally as Hannah's Law. Morgan Harrington's mother, Gil, founded Help Save the Next Girl, a nonprofit organization that educates young women about predatory dangers and personal safety. Morgan's family also funded a scholarship at Virginia Tech and built a school in Africa, both named in Morgan's honor. The University of Virginia established the Hannah Graham Scholarship for students studying to be physician assistants. An annual memorial softball tournament was created in her name. In December 2020, Jesse Matthew was transferred from Sussex State Prison to a Richmond hospital under heavy law enforcement guard. He'd been diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. As of May 2025, Matthew remains incarcerated at Red Onion State Prison, serving 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Gil Harrington released a statement, "We are not invested in retribution. What we wanted was to have Jesse Matthew stopped. This has been accomplished. His horrific crime spree is over." The question that haunts investigators is whether there were other victims. Matthew operated for at least 9 years between his first known case and his capture. Were Morgan and Hannah his only victims? Investigators believe there may be others. Matthew's methods were too refined, too practiced. But without confessions, without evidence, those cases remain mysteries. Hannah Graham's story isn't just about one predator. It's about friends who let an intoxicated young woman leave a party alone. It's about universities that allowed accused perpetrators to simply transfer schools. It's about laws that didn't require DNA collection for minor offenses. Hannah's friends have carried unbearable guilt since that night. They offered to walk her home. She said no. They respected her independence. Should they have insisted? Should they have followed her anyway? The answer is yes. Always yes. Never let a friend who's been drinking go home alone. Stay together. Make a pact before you go out. You arrive together, you leave together. It doesn't matter if someone says they're fine. It doesn't matter if it's only half a mile. In the time it takes to walk that distance, everything can change. Hannah Graham was smart, capable, surrounded by people who loved her. None of it mattered because Jesse Matthew was patient, practiced, and determined. He saw an opportunity outside Tempo Restaurant at 1:03 a.m., and he took it. The surveillance camera captured the moment his arm went around her shoulder. He'd been following her for 20 minutes, waiting for that exact moment when she was alone and vulnerable enough. Within 2 hours, Hannah would be gone forever. We live in a world where women cannot safely walk home alone at night, where drinking with friends carries risks that men never face, where saying "I'm not getting in the car with you" isn't enough to save your life. The only comfort, if it can be called comfort, is that Matthew will die in prison. He will never hunt again. Hannah and Morgan were his last victims. Their families made sure of that. But here's what matters most. Hannah's Law has already led to arrests in dozens of cold cases across Virginia. DNA collected from minor offenses has linked perpetrators to unsolved attacks. Women who would have become victims have been saved because predators were identified before they could strike again. Hannah's death wasn't meaningless. Her legacy is measured in lives saved, in predators caught, in families who still have their daughters because the law finally caught up with technology. Justice was served, but nothing can bring them home. Asterisk, remember this. On September 13th, 2014, at 1:03 a.m., Hannah Graham sent her last text message. Her friends were 20 minutes away. Her apartment was half a mile away. Help was everywhere around her, but she was alone when it mattered most. Don't let this happen to someone you love. Stay together. Watch each other. Make the hard choice to insist, even when they say they're fine, because the alternative is 36 days of searching, followed by a lifetime of grief. Remember Hannah. Remember Morgan. And please, watch over your friends the way their friends wish they had that night. Asterisk.